You could be buying the exact same perennial next year because the one growing in your garden right now is already carrying a problem into winter. And I know that sounds strange because when September arrives and flowers begin fading, most gardeners simply think the season is coming to an end. We see yellowing leaves and brown stems and assume they're nothing more than the leftovers of summer. I used to think exactly the same thing. I would leave my perennial beds alone and tell myself, I'll clean everything up at spring. But after a few frustrating seasons, I started noticing something. The same pests and diseases kept coming back year after year. Fungal spots would appear again, insects seemed to arrive almost overnight, and some plants looked weaker every spring. That's when I realized I wasn't really starting a new gardening season. I was carrying the old one forward. Dead leaves, stems, and diseased plant material can become hiding places for pests and disease, almost like putting a problem into storage and bringing it back out when spring arrives. That's when I completely changed the way I look at September. I stopped seeing it as the month when the garden simply starts dying back, and started seeing it as my chance to decide what I want to take into the next growing season and what I want to leave behind. Now there are 7 perennials I pay especially close attention to before winter arrives. And I'm not saying you should cut every perennial in your garden to the ground, because that can be a mistake too. Some plants are better left standing through winter, and I'll explain why later. But when these 7 plants have finished their growing season, removing old, diseased, or heavily damaged growth can give your garden a much cleaner start in spring. Think of it like cleaning your house before leaving for a long trip. You wouldn't knowingly leave spoiled food on the counter and expect everything to be fresh when you return months later. Your garden deserves the same kind of preparation. So today I'm going to show you the 7 perennials I check first in September, what I look for, what I cut, and what I leave alone. And make sure you stay until number 1 because it's one of the plants I watch most carefully for recurring fungal disease. 7. Peonies. Peonies are one of those plants that can look absolutely spectacular in spring and then look almost forgotten by the end of summer. And I've grown them long enough to know that one of the easiest mistakes is treating their fading foliage like harmless garden debris. It isn't always harmless. By September, peony foliage can develop brown, black, or reddish spots caused by fungal diseases, and when infected leaves are left around the plant through winter, disease organisms can remain in the garden and potentially affect new growth the following season. Think of it this way: the leaves may be dead, but the problem doesn't necessarily die with them. That's why once the foliage has naturally started shutting down for winter, especially if it has been damaged by disease, I cut the stems back close to the ground and remove the fallen leaves around the plant. I don't rush to cut healthy green peony foliage in the middle of summer, because those leaves are still working for the plant and helping it store energy for next year's growth. So I wait until the foliage has naturally yellowed or browned, and the plant is clearly entering dormancy. Then I clean everything up. Leaving diseased leaves at the base of a peony is a little like sweeping dirt under a rug. From a distance, everything looks clean, but the problem is still sitting underneath. I also avoid putting obviously diseased peony foliage into my compost pile and instead dispose of it according to local guidance. It only takes a few minutes, but I've found that this simple cleanup gives the plant a much cleaner starting point when spring arrives. And that brings us to another perennial where fall cleanup can be especially valuable. 6. Bee balm. Bee balm is one of my favorite plants when it's blooming because the flowers attract pollinators, the colors are beautiful, and a mature clump covered in flowers can become one of the busiest places in the entire garden. But bee balm has one weakness that I've learned to watch very carefully: powdery mildew. I've seen bee balm go from beautiful and healthy looking to covered in that familiar white coating surprisingly quickly, and at first I made the mistake of thinking, I'll deal with it next year. That was not one of my better gardening decisions. If infected foliage and stems remain around the plant, you're leaving behind material that may contain disease organisms. So when the season is coming to an end, especially if my bee balm has suffered from powdery mildew, I cut it back to the ground and remove the old stems and leaves from the bed instead of leaving them piled around the crown. But here's another lesson I've learned. Cutting bee balm down in September isn't a substitute for good growing conditions. If your bee balm repeatedly develops mildew, look at the bigger picture. Is the plant overcrowded? Is there enough air movement? Is it growing in a spot that stays damp for too long? Are neighboring plants packed together like people trying to squeeze through a doorway? Good airflow can make a tremendous difference. And I've learned that gardening usually isn't about finding one magical trick that solves everything. It's about removing the conditions that allow problems to thrive. Sometimes the best defense is simply giving the plant more breathing room. 5. Garden phlox. Garden phlox can be breathtaking when those tall flower clusters are covered in blooms, and they can turn an ordinary border into something that looks almost painted. But phlox can also be particularly vulnerable to fungal problems such as powdery mildew. If my phlox has been badly affected, I don't want all that infected material sitting around the plant through winter. By September, once flowering has finished and the plant begins shutting down, I cut the stems back near the soil line and clean up the fallen leaves around the base. This is one of those gardening jobs that doesn't look impressive while you're doing it, because there is no dramatic transformation. You're simply cutting stems, collecting leaves, and carrying a bag to the compost or waste bin. But I've learned that good gardening often looks boring today so that it can look beautiful 6 months from now. That's the trade. If you've ever wondered why the same disease seems to return to the same plant year after year, take a closer look at what you're leaving behind in autumn. Pests and pathogens can persist in plant debris and favorable conditions, which is one reason fall sanitation matters so much. You're not trying to make your garden sterile because that's impossible, but you are reducing the amount of problematic material that gets a free ticket into the next growing season. 4. Hosta. Hostas are incredibly forgiving plants, and they tolerate shade, return year after year, and can transform a dark corner of the garden with their huge leaves. But those same leaves can become a problem when autumn arrives. Hosta foliage can provide shelter for slugs, snails, eggs, and other pests, especially once the leaves collapse onto the ground and create a cool, protected layer underneath. I've had years when I thought my hostas were simply full of slugs, and then I started paying more attention to what was happening underneath the foliage. During the growing season, those large leaves naturally create a cool environment, but once they collapse in autumn, they can become convenient hiding places for pests. So, after a hard frost or once the hosta foliage has naturally collapsed, I remove it, cutting the leaves and stems down close to the ground and clearing away old debris. I don't obsess over making the soil perfectly bare because that's not the goal. The goal is to remove old plant material that has become diseased, heavily damaged, or full of pests. A comparison I always remember is this. A messy perennial bed can be like an old attic, because every crack, pile, and forgotten corner becomes another possible hiding place. You're not necessarily creating a pest problem simply by having organic matter in your garden, but if a particular bed repeatedly suffers from pests or disease, reducing those hiding places can make your job much easier. 3. Iris. Iris can be one of the most beautiful perennials in the garden, but certain iris pests and diseases can take advantage of old foliage and plant debris. One problem I've learned to take seriously is iris borer, particularly in areas where it is established because these pests can damage rhizomes, weaken the plant, and create opportunities for rot and disease. So when the growing season ends, I don't simply walk past my iris beds and say, "I'll clean that up in spring." I inspect them. I remove old, damaged, or diseased foliage and clear away debris around the rhizomes. And if the foliage has been heavily affected, I cut it down and remove it from the garden rather than simply dropping it onto the soil. Think of it as removing a damaged part of a house before winter, instead of waiting until the damage spreads throughout the structure. Fall cleanup is also a good opportunity to look closely at the iris itself. Are the clumps overcrowded? Do the rhizomes look healthy? Is dead material trapped around them? Sometimes the answer isn't simply cut it down. Sometimes the plant is telling you that it needs to be divided, cleaned up, or given better airflow. I've also learned to pay attention to how the rhizomes are planted, because iris generally prefer to sit relatively close to the soil surface rather than being buried deeply. A little inspection in September can reveal problems that would be much harder to notice once spring growth begins. And now we're getting into the final two, where fall cleanup can be especially useful when disease has been an issue. 2. Daylilies. Daylilies are tough. I've seen them survive heat, neglect, poor soil, and conditions that would make other perennials give up. But tough doesn't mean maintenance-free. By the end of the season, daylily foliage can become yellow, brown, floppy, and generally unattractive. And when that foliage has also been affected by disease, leaving it in place doesn't offer much benefit. Once the plant has finished growing for the season and the foliage is clearly declining, I cut it back, usually leaving the crown and roots undisturbed while removing the old leaves and stems. Then I clean the area around the plant, especially if I've noticed fungal leaf spots during the growing season. But there's another reason I like fall cleanup on daylilies. It makes spring dramatically easier. Instead of walking into the garden in April and seeing a tangled pile of dead leaves, I start with a clean bed where new growth is easy to see. It's almost like clearing your desk before starting a new project. You don't clean the desk because the desk itself works better. You clean it because you're giving yourself a cleaner starting point. That's exactly how I think about fall garden cleanup. You're preparing the stage for the next season before the next season even begins. 1. Hollyhocks. Hollyhocks are spectacular, and their tall flower spikes can make a garden feel almost like a cottage garden postcard. But there's a catch. Hollyhocks are well known for rust disease. Once you see those orange-brown spots appearing on the foliage, you won't forget them. I've had seasons where the lower leaves looked almost covered in tiny rusty freckles. And if you've experienced that yourself, you already understand why fall cleanup matters. I don't want diseased hollyhock foliage sitting around the base of the plant all winter. So after the plant has finished flowering and the foliage begins to decline, I cut the stems down and remove the affected material. Again, I don't throw heavily diseased foliage into my compost pile. I remove it from the growing area. I also pay close attention to spacing because if hollyhocks are packed tightly together in a damp location, you're essentially creating a tiny greenhouse for fungal problems. Good airflow matters, sunlight matters, watering practices matter, and sanitation matters. One piece of advice I wish I had understood much earlier is this. Don't think of fall cleanup as punishment for your plants. Think of it as closing the chapter on the old growing season. You're not cutting these plants because they're ugly. You're cutting them because the season is over and you want to reduce the amount of dead, diseased, or pest-infested material left behind. But before you grab your pruners, there is one extremely important warning you need to hear. Don't cut every perennial down. This is where I see gardeners make another mistake. They hear cut perennials back in fall, and suddenly everything in the garden gets chopped to the ground, but that's not what I'm recommending. Some perennials are actually better left standing through winter. Plants such as coneflowers and ornamental grasses can provide winter structure, their seed heads can provide food for birds, and their stems can offer shelter for beneficial insects. Their dried structure can also keep your garden from looking completely bare during the cold months. So don't turn your garden into a parking lot. The goal is selective cleanup, not total destruction. Focus on plants that are diseased, heavily infested, or known to benefit from being cut back. And always consider the specific plant, your climate, and the problems you've actually seen in your garden. After making plenty of mistakes over the years, I've developed a simple September routine that makes this whole process much easier. First, I walk through the garden before cutting anything and look for leaves with obvious disease symptoms, insect damage, crowded areas, and plants that have already begun their natural transition into dormancy. Then I separate healthy-looking plant material from material that clearly has a problem. I clean my pruners before moving between plants, especially when I'm dealing with obvious disease, and then I cut back the perennials that actually need it. Finally, I clean up the debris around the base. That last step is incredibly easy to underestimate because you can cut a plant perfectly and still leave half the problem lying on the ground. It's like trimming your hair and then leaving all the clippings scattered across the bathroom floor. Technically, the haircut is finished, but the job isn't. I don't try to make every bed completely sterile because gardens aren't laboratories, and there will always be leaves, insects, microorganisms, and organic matter. The goal is simply to reduce the amount of problematic material that can carry pests and diseases into another season.